So why can we remember the words to our favorite song as a child, but yet we cannot remember where we put our keys just 10 minutes earlier? And the problem with memory loss isn't age, but something that's been nicknamed more recently as leaky brain or issues around the blood-brain barrier. And so I'm here today with leading brain health expert, Dr. Anthony Capasso, who's going to bring us some helpful tips on what you can do to avoid those embarrassing senior moments. Dr. Capasso, it's great to see you again. And I want to ask you what's going on in the US today with all of the issues around this, what seems to me like a spike in brain health.
Todd, thank you so much for having me on, and it's
Of course.
great to see you too. Um, there's a lot of reasons that people are having, this, kind of brain fog or brain dysfunction. And there's really not one single explanation for it. I mean, it sometimes it can be related to increased stress. And I think with everything going around in the world, that's probably one of the biggest drivers
Sure.
that I'll see in my office is just everyone's stressed. And the other thing that I'll see is um, sleep deprivation or sleep disorders,
Right.
being big drivers for it. And then, as you mentioned earlier, this idea of leaky brain and this idea of the blood-brain barrier, which is this um, area of the brain that protects it from getting injured by, pathogens and
Right.
things that we kind of get exposed to all the time. Um, and what happens as we age is that this barrier gets weaker because of the exposures to things like tobacco and alcohol and chemicals and just stress, lack of
Right.
sleep, all these things that can do that. And so when the blood-brain barrier starts to get a little more leakier, then things that are getting into the brain that shouldn't can now damage the brain, right? And the goal of the blood-brain barrier is to protect the brain, allow good stuff to get in and keep the bad stuff out, essentially.
Okay. Um, and I want to expand on that just briefly for a second, because what I'm seeing is people who, typically we associate these types of issues with people in their 70s, 80s. And so I wanted to allow people the opportunity to hear it right from an expert to say, what is it that we can do to really fortify that blood-brain barrier in order to protect us and not have those situations where we're staring at our best friend and can't remember their name.
Right. And what I tell my patients, the most important thing is you have to be balanced, right? And balanced in regards to, and you mentioned it, you got to start with what I call a low inflammatory diet. You have to eliminate the refined starches and sugars, artificial trans fats, all those high amounts of carbohydrates, because we know that's one of the major issues, especially over time, that injures the blood-brain barrier. And so getting back to, just eating a healthy diet, right? Keep those sugars low, keep those bad trans fats out of the diet. Exercise, strength training, keeping your stress down and sleep, like we mentioned, you have to have that. And then what you want to do is you want to support that blood-brain barrier by supporting the rebuilding. You want, a lot of really good nutrients and antioxidants to keep that blood-brain barrier strong.
Okay, so the blood-brain barrier is this network of cells providing this fortification, and as I understand its role and function, it keeps out those inflammatory agents that can wreak havoc with our neurocognition. And
Right.
so there's a particular part of the cell that you and I have discussed at length, and this goes back to when I was learning to fly helicopters and having some brain dysfunction in terms of the amount and volume of information and retention that was required. You were the one that led me down the road on mitochondria and really powering up the mitochondria, because after all, memories, whether it's our favorite song as a kid or
Yeah.
where we put the keys 10 minutes ago, are electrical signals. And those impulses need to travel through healthy cells. And what you were explaining to me is that the density of mitochondria inside the brain cells is particularly high in comparison to the rest of the body. Is that correct?
Correct. You're absolutely right. I mean, besides the heart, the brain is just packed with them. And what we know about mitochondria, and some people say mitochondria, I remember that from high school biology class.
Yeah.
We think of it as the powerhouses of the cells because it does produce energy. It's the area of the cell that breaks down your food, like your carbohydrates and your fats, and produces energy. But it's also the brains of your cell because it senses what's going on inside and outside of the brain. And it also has its own DNA separate from the DNA in the cell, which is
Interesting.
completely different. And what we know about mitochondria is that every age-related disease, every disease you can think of has some form of mitochondrial dysfunction. The cells aren't healthy. They're not working well. Brains need brain cells, the neurons need a lot of energy. And so if those mitochondria aren't kicking and producing all this healthy energy in the form of ATP, then lo and behold, your cognition starts to slip. You get a little more forgetful. Your retention is not as good. So, one of the most important things is, keeping that mitochondria as healthy as possible. And the things that I mentioned earlier about, a low inflammatory diet, keeping carbs down and exercising, all of those things increase mitochondrial biogenesis, or the production of new and healthy mitochondria in your body. So,
Okay.
and the
So
thing with brains is that even a small drop in energy in the brain cells connotates big things. Okay,
okay, well,
so
that's
a little bit.
important, right? Like you
Exactly.
said about sleep or some of these other activities that we want to stay focused on and keep as a top priority. I think it's important to realize that even the smallest amount, like you just said, is something that reduces brain function significantly because there isn't much room for error, and we need to do whatever we can lifestyle wise, which is what you pointed out at the beginning, and then make some choices around um, different ways to support the brain function and that
Sure.
cellular production, all that kind of stuff. So I know that we've talked in the past about different parts of natural supplements that really serve to fortify the mitochondria, power up the mitochondria, power up the brain cell, and then reduce inflammation. One of those in particular is Brazilian green bee propolis. What's your experience with that in terms of how you've seen it function within your clinic?
Sure. It's one of my favorite nutrients and antioxidants for protecting the blood-brain barrier and protecting brain health. And it's interesting because, propolis has this really cool antioxidant we call CAPE. It's caffeic acid phenyl and it's
I liked it better when it was just cape.
CAPE. Yeah, we'll call it CAPE. We'll call it the CAPE that protects your brain cells.
Oh, good one.
Um, and I mean, it's been studied as an antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, antiviral, antifungal, anti-neoplastic. So it's got this crazy protective benefit. Um, and it's got specifically a neuroprotective effect, especially in neurodegenerative diseases. So I think the CAPE is one of the antioxidants that are in propolis. It's got many, but it's one of them that I think is probably the main reason that we see such a benefit, in the long term with taking it, from a lot of these types of things with brain inflammation and dysregulation and all this oxidative stress to get rid of all that damage that's sitting in there.
Okay. And there's a number of other things that we can talk about. One I'm gonna touch on real quick is melatonin. Now, a lot of times people think of melatonin as the nighttime sleep drug, but
Right.
yet instead it's actually a very powerful antioxidant as well. And can you just give us some background on your experience with melatonin?
Yeah, sure. So melatonin is naturally made in the pineal gland, and it is an incredible antioxidant. When I first started reading about melatonin, it was in the benefits in diabetic patients and how it benefited all of these different things in a diabetic patient. And I'm like, wow, this is really an interesting, natural hormone that the body produces. From the standpoint of brain, it is a great anti-inflammatory. It helps protect that blood-brain barrier from oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is those injuries that we talked about, the things that damage the neurons. And they've shown that, when they give it, it improved the blood-brain barrier. So not only does it reduce the injury that gets in, it makes the barrier stronger so stuff doesn't get in. So it's kind of this dual effect. So really interesting, natural, again, a substance that gets released from our body that has just a very wide protective effect. Like, I don't think of melatonin as a sleep aid, even though it can make you a little tired. I
Yeah.
think of it more as a way of protecting, and even the non-ionizing radiation, there's studies that would show that it helps to protect the brain from those types of things. So again,
That's good.
very, very strong anti-inflammatory, very, very
Interesting.
protective effect. And so again, another one of my favorite kind of brain nutrients.
Nice. Not many people realize, I think, that it actually has that role and function in the body. So that's
Yeah.
very insightful. How much work have you done around mushrooms, and in particular with reishi mushroom, let's say?
So I love mushrooms for a whole wide range of reasons, and
Yeah,
especially I think with as many as the pandemic that we had, and
sure.
understanding there are mushrooms that increase our body's immune system. So I use a lot of mushrooms from that standpoint.
Okay.
Um, but they've looked at reishi specifically with basically blood flow to the brain, and what they found that it improved blood flow to the brain, it improved the blood-brain barrier, and it also reduced inflammation in the brain. So I mean, wow, we're improving the blood flow, right, which helps all
Yeah,
the nutrients,
yeah,
reducing the inflammation, and then also protecting that barrier. So, and it's been studied in Alzheimer's research, and has shown, in mice that it improved the actually cognitive function of the mice in one of the studies. So again, reishi I think is a great nutrient for brain function. Again, improving blood flow, protecting the blood-brain barrier, reducing that inflammation. So it just doesn't work in one area. It's kind of working to improve the whole system, which is kind of what you want in
yeah.
a nutrient for the brain.
Okay, well, that's this is good. This is fantastic stuff, and I want to be mindful of people's time, because I know that oftentimes when we put these things up, people are just like, get to the point. I want the information, and then I want to go. So what I wanted to talk about was just those three ingredients,
Okay.
because they are kind of the core foundation of a natural supplement that you developed called Pure Nero. That you use in your office and recommend to people, but that is also sold online, so that if they wanted, they could go over to a page. We'll put a link here in this discussion, whether it's a learn more button. I'm going to look forward to our next discussion. We'll touch on a few of these other brain ingredients and a whole array of health and wellness tips that we're going to be bringing people. So I appreciate your time, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for having me.
Okay, take care, Anthony.
Take
Bye now.
care.
Did you know that simply increasing the power supply to your brain can sharpen your memory and get rid of brain fog? Pure Nero uses just a few simple ingredients to give a powerful, natural boost to your brain's power supply.
I noticed all of a sudden it was like a light went on.
My brain fog was much better.
I've been able to recall things a lot faster.
What is it exactly that powers up your brain, though? Well, your thoughts and memories are basically made from electricity, and brain waves are pulses of electric current running through your brain cells. Each thought or memory is coded in a specific pattern of electric waves. So when someone says cheesecake, Your brain creates specific electric patterns, and you remember the taste, the texture, and even how eating it makes you feel. But what if your brain runs low on electric charge? Or worse, what if the electric waves in your brain get shorted out? That's exactly what happens when you have the word cheesecake on the tip of your tongue and it just won't come out. That's what happens when you forget your glasses are on your head and then spend 5 minutes looking for them. In fact, it's the cause of all the brain fog and all the embarrassing senior moments you may be experiencing. It's why most of the so-called brain boosters don't work, because they don't increase your brain's power supply, which means they don't address the real root cause of memory problems and brain fog. Listen, although your brain makes up only 2% of your body weight, it guzzles up a quarter of all your body's energy, and it generates all the power inside something called mitochondria. Tiny organelles in every brain cell that take the food you eat and the oxygen you breathe and turn it into the electric power your brain needs for sharp memory and clear thinking. To keep up with the huge demand for electricity, you have 2 million mitochondria inside every one of your brain cells, which allows for the powerful electric pulses that form thoughts and retrieve memories. It's the reason why Dr. Anthony Capasso created Pure Nero. It's the world's first brain health formulation ever designed specifically to nourish and support your brain's power-producing mitochondria. So unlike mere brain booster supplements, Pure Nero actually gives your brain the raw electric power it needs to function at its best. Since Dr. Capasso started making Pure Nero available outside his clinic, it has gone viral.
For the last couple of years, I've kind of been in a fog, a brain fog, where it seemed like I was a little detached with reality. And then about 2 weeks later, I wasn't thinking about it, but I noticed that all of a sudden the fog had kind of lifted. I noticed all of a sudden it was like a light went on.
I have hypothyroidism, and so when my thyroid levels are abnormal, I tend to get the brain fog and also some short-term memory problems. Definitely within the first 3 days, I started to note that my memory, short-term memory, was actually more improved. Also, my brain fog was much better. It's working so well for me, and I'm amazed. I do take a lot of supplements, and this is probably the best supplement that I take.
Over the past 2 years, I've had issues with my memory. I've had trouble thinking. I've had trouble sleeping. After using Pure Neuro, it helped me sleep through the night fully the first time I've used it. And ever since I've taken it, I've been able to recall things a lot faster and think a lot faster. And I'm extremely grateful for it.
Customers love the effects. People are simply getting way more out of their lives. If you're ready to give your brain's power supply a powerful, natural boost and experience the life-changing benefits of razor-sharp memory, bulletproof mental agility, and seemingly endless ability to concentrate, then it's time to choose the only doctor-developed solution designed specifically to restore the power output of your brain's mitochondria to 100%.